speakers, and yeah, he's just had a book come out which I'm planning on grabbing to bring for the end of his talk so we can pass it around. So I'm sure we'll get a slide and hear more about that, but take it away, Liam.
Hello, cool. Hi, thanks for coming. I am obsessed with cactus, and I will rant about cactus for the next hour or so, and then there'll be a break, and then we'll be auctioning cactus, so I'll rant at a slightly faster pace. So my name's Liam. The Mescaline garden is like, we call it a research or an ethnobotanical nursery. So we sell psychoactive plants, but I think the gap that we fill, because a lot of people sell plants, is like educating people about plants. And the sneaky thing is it's a bit of a Trojan horse for drugs and chemicals more broadly. I think that plants are a really nice way to educate people about drugs because plants are kind of easier for people to, break through some of their stigma and opinions around chemicals. But my chemistry, it's a part of Western Sydney University. It's called NICM. It's a natural products lab. We do a bunch of stuff with cannabis and herbs from Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, things like this. But the dream is for our garden to also have a lab attached so we can be kind of independent of a university, because most of the plants of my interest, including cactus, have only been tested a handful of times. And cannabis might be the best example in this regard because people have gone truly hard on it, like they have on a few psychoactive plants. And going really hard means like testing a plant every minute of every day for its life. And then we know one individual, right? But that's like super zooming in. And that's where I want to get with many, many plants, including cactus. But sadly, I think that is some time and potentially billions of dollars away. But if you know a billionaire, please send them my way. So we are on Bundjalung country. I don't know much about local mob, but I live on Darug and Gundurra country. And I'm also, I'm not an Aboriginal guy, so I can't really speak for that, as interesting and cool and relevant to us as that is. But what we do know, not just about Aboriginal people here in Australia, but about psychoactive plants all over the world, more often than not, they have like a really close relationship with Indigenous people who are like the original plant scientists, wizards, knowing all amazing shit about plants that no one else knows, right? So they're the OGs, so best we remember that. And I don't have like a clear solution or pathway to tell you, but the reason I'm saying this is because I think in my own enthusiasm, sometimes I haven't approached this topic with the sensitivity I should have, and I've pissed a lot of Indigenous people off just by being interested, because, drugs and people who have all sorts of marginalized conditions, whether it be because of race or drugs or mental health or whatever, as a general rule, have worse social outcomes, including drugs. So if you come to Indigenous people and tell me about your drug traditions, they might already be pissed because you're calling it drugs. It's like putting a frame that maybe they don't want to put on their traditions. So I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it, but I'm just saying it's like a super touchy subject, and I encourage you to be kind of as respectful as you can in talking about this. And that little symbol down here on the left, I assume you all know the Aboriginal flag, but this on the left is a symbol of the Native American Church, who are the only people in the US who are legally allowed to consume peyote, which on the one hand is cool, yeah, Indigenous rights to maintain psychoactive traditions, I like this. But there are other Indigenous groups in the US and elsewhere that don't have the legal rights to maintain peyote traditions that their people have been doing for thousands of years. So it's hard for us to even understand, hey, what are those different groups that aren't part of this church? Because most of them, they're not formalized as a group. The Native American Church formed as a way of different Indigenous groups kind of joining forces to have some power in the face of the colonizers. But some people also nah, I don't want to join the Native American Church. I've got my own church and we're not part of that group. And respect to that tradition, but then there's all these internal politics that are also happening with Indigenous communities. So I'm just trying to highlight absolute mess. Okay, so I'm mostly speaking about cactus. It depends on the type of cactus and where you are, but the general thing to understand, and that I need to remember in operating my business, is that you can get away with growing mescaline cacti, San Pedro and peyote, in New South Wales, Victoria, ACT. If you were growing it elsewhere, there is a chance you might get in some shit it gets a little bit like unclear about what is illegal and isn't illegal, because some of, like in Queensland for example, if cactus are considered prohibited, it is, I think, as a general rule, I'm not a lawyer, in my understanding, because they contain an illegal chemical, and thus any plant that contains that illegal chemical is potentially banned. It hasn't been like listed by name. Well, I hear people saying that, and I see businesses selling cacti in Queensland. Well, I am not selling cactus to Queensland because I am a little bit concerned. Because in my understanding, it's actually the only state in Australia where cops have been trained to identify cactus. Because that's another thing that makes me feel a bit free. No one knows how to tell which one's a good one. I've got an email from Wollongong Chief of Police asking me to, hey, this cactus was found in a drug lab. Is this a San Pedro? I'm like, oh, I don't know, can't tell. Anyway, so tricky thing. New South Wales, it's chill. Some places it might be banned by name. Other places it might just be banned by chemical. I think if it's just by chemical, maybe you're in a little bit of a safer area. But just to like recognize my own point of view that not everyone agrees with, and that's totally fine. But I'm like a bit of a drug warrior. I think that all drugs and chemicals are tools. They're not good or bad, and they certainly don't deserve to be banned. Because I think when we ban them, we encourage secrecy, ignorance, and just general bad quality shit. So all the harms are kind of exacerbated. So a big part of what I want to do is encourage people to look at like psychoactive equality or something around that isn't saying, hey, mescaline is bad. It isn't, and mescaline is cool, but it's also a psychedelic. So it's like, some people say cannabis is good. Everyone here is on board with that. Hell yeah. Some people then, not everyone is saying psychedelics are good. Also good, on board with that. But then people say, oh, but not about this drug, not about methamphetamine, not about heroin. And I'm not saying these things don't have risks, but I'm saying that I don't assume that they are bad and they can't potentially be good tools. Because I certainly think they should be, and I certainly don't want to judge anyone who that's their choice. But that's my point of view. You can disagree. It's just hopefully knowing that it'll help. What I'm saying, where I'm coming from, will hopefully make more sense. All right. So we're going to start by like trying to paint a broad picture. Like my code word for drugs that I use when I'm trying to be undercover is I call them psychoactives, right? Psychoactives and drugs, people tend to use these things interchangeably. One sounds a little bit more friendly to an anti-drug audience. Psychoactives are the meta-category of my interest. Psychedelics are a subcategory, and mescaline is in that subcategory. So I'm just trying to paint that picture. I'm going to give a bit more context to like how people use mescaline cacti, both traditionally and in other contemporary circles, also in a medicinal context. What's a potential application? And then I'm going a little bit into San Pedro specifically, because there are two main types of mescaline cacti. I'm going to tell you more, but San Pedro is what I think we should all get more hyped about. And then I'm going to go into the chemistry and touch a little bit on, like, I'm a little bit more free in what I say spoken, less so when it's recorded, and then less so again online, because until some of the work out of our labs gets published, I'm like not supposed to share it, but there's kind of like some flexibility. So if you have any questions that I don't answer, maybe come to me after and I can tell you a little bit more information. But I'm going to tell you a bit about my mescaline quantification in different cactus, i.e. which one is the strongest. That's something people like to know. So, starting big, what is psychopharmacology? Psychopharmacology is like how we describe the activity of drugs that get you high, right? It gets a little bit like messy, and this is definitely a simplification of how it works, because like I think most people have some idea that like psychology of all the medical disciplines is kind of the most fluffy and the hardest to pin down, and that's part of like the human mind. Like, what is the mind? What is a human? How am I different from this? What is consciousness? Like, it quickly spirals outwards into madness. So I'm just trying to keep it really simple. But if we try to say how that works within the body, simply, I like to think of two main things. I like to think of the drug and the receptor, and we might explain them using like a lock and key model, where the drug is the key and the receptor is the part of your body that key unlocks, and that releases some kind of psychoactive effect. It's actually way more complicated than that. People call it like a pharmacological cascade. It's like that lock or actually opens 10 different doors. Each of those doors leads down a pathway to another house, and there's a city in each of those houses. And then if you turn the light off, this house loses all electricity, but not that one. Like, it just like, how to one little pathway in the body affect this thing that is a high is actually super complex, but thinking of this lock key receptor drug model is a nice way for kind of making some assumptions around what is this drug going to do when it's in my body? How's it going to affect me? Because I find as consumers, that's the main thing that we want to know. What happens when I eat this thing, right? Well, if you pay attention to the receptors that's being opened and the drugs that is opening those receptors, you can make some pretty strong guesses about the type of activity that is going to be produced. So that's what a psychedelic is, right? Am I going too fast? No, psychedelic is on this slide. So psychedelics are what I'll call a subgroup of psychoactive. The lock in the body that they work on primarily, it's called, it's like a sub-serotonin receptor. People call it 5-HT2A. So if we're trying to make drugs that produce effects that feel like psychedelics, we're trying to target that receptor in the body. And the other thing we know is because of the shape of that receptor, the different keys, the different drugs that potentially open that lock, we can also make guesses around, hey, how could I make a new key? That key might be similarly shaped to psilocybin, thus I expect it's going to open the 5-HT2A receptor, and thus I expect it's going to produce stuff like mystical experience, other weird visual effects, stuff that psychedelics do. So just by focusing on these mechanisms, maybe we can predict the type of high that we're going to get. Oh yeah, mescaline is the psychedelic that we're about to hone in on. It lasts, like I think the psychedelic people understand most seem to be mushrooms, 4 to 6 hours effect. Mescaline is more like 8 to 12 or even a bit longer, closer to LSD in duration, but I would describe it as like less stimulating than LSD, even though it is somewhat stimulating. I don't know if you've ever had acid and then wanted to sleep and then not being able to sleep. Well, with cactus, maybe you can, maybe not. So if you want to know this broader frame, please buy my book. I also have a website called Psychombo that's an app, but I'm trying to, in that regard, explain the whole, what I might call the psychoactive rainbow, right? All these different colors, because there's not just psychedelics, there's not just GABA agonists like alcohol and Valium, there's not just opioids like heroin and codeine, there's actually a whole range of different stuff. And I think the more we understand the variety that's out there, the more we can maybe counteract some of these like stigma, anti-psychoactive attitudes. I think that's all. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to say. So let's just get to cactus. Oh no, let's pause here because this is actually what is bringing a lot of like, not freedom. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because psychedelic medicine looks like it's going to be a big thing. What happened was there's a couple of studies. Basically, to get a new drug to market, it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time, but people got very close with MDMA, which then had some problems, and then psilocybin. And so all these companies that make money off medicine are now being like, oh my God, are these things actually going to be good for mental health conditions? Evidence suggests maybe, so everyone just starts throwing their cash, right? And then we get all these crazy media headlines around psilocybin this, psychedelics that, and yes, it's promising, yes, it's good news, but it's like so early days. In Australia, we actually rescheduled psilocybin and MDMA. Many of you may have heard of this. And I'm like divided over this, right? Because on the one hand, any progress is good progress. We're like totally repressed by shitty prohibition. Like, I certainly want legal cannabis, but I am a happy medical cannabis patient and I enjoy the freedoms that give me. I appreciate that despite it not being the ideal situation as I see it. So I've got that point of view with these psychedelic changes. But then I've also, in my scientific hat on, I'm in the lab and like speaking professionally, we should not have made that change because we don't have the minimum standard of evidence required to reschedule. So normally to be allowed to sell a new drug to market, like it's kind of accepted in most countries that you need to have a phase 3 clinical trial achieved, which is basically like, you know, you prove the drug isn't harmful, you've given it to people with your target condition, and it's had success, right? But to get to that phase 3 and complete it, it's like $1 billion. And no one's throwing down $1 billion like casually, especially normally not on plants, because how do I monopolize the thing that I spent $1 billion so I get my $1 billion back? What if I spend $1 billion on cannabis medicine, it gets legalized, and then that guy just starts growing it? Like how am I going to recoup that initial investment? So that's the challenging thing that happens around all plants. But with psychedelics, not in plant form, it has gotten quite far, so people are making a whole hoo-ha, maybe we're going to make all this money from it, it becomes media headlines, etc., etc. So I still am grateful for like medical advancement and freedoms around psychedelics, but is it part of my dream drug reform goal? Not really. What was I supposed to say other stuff? No, that's all good. All right, so mescaline cacti culture. What are the contexts in which it was traditionally used? I mentioned before around the Native American church. That's like the easiest, most public-facing body to try to understand peyote traditions in the US. But like I said, it doesn't represent like peyote traditions more broadly, because there are other groups excluded from that. And then I think there's even more, at least in my limited understanding, of a rich tradition in Mexico. That's the only other place peyote grows natively. And there are many people that have been maintaining their traditions without this same kind of intrusion from government. Like, there's been other problems, but there's just like more people doing more diverse stuff with peyote that's been more kind of supported by the powers that be, despite the kind of, they have less financial resources, so who's kicking money towards peyote conservation in Mexico? It's not really a social level priority, but the culture is rich and easier to understand there. But it's all, at best, in Spanish. I mean, or not at worst, but in reality, like, Spanish is also the language of the colonizers. So how do I understand peyote culture without that influence when I don't even speak Spanish? It's very tricky to understand what peyote culture looks like, but rest assured, it's very complex. Similar situation with San Pedro. I think there is more like cultural spaces that are accessible to the public. I don't know if you've heard of a place called Chavan de Juanita, very famous site in Peru with like awesome old like archaeological ruins with cactus carving, even cactus growing there, and people have been like tripping balls there for thousands of years doing all sorts of cool cactus stuff. So you can check it out, but also how do I represent this complex culture? I don't know, I can't. But I think, you know, I'd love to know more about it. If you go there and learn something, please tell me. In Australia, obviously, there are, well, no, maybe not obviously, but there are no native cactus. We don't have any cactus, right? So we also don't have any indigenous cactus traditions. I think most people we actually have mescaline cactus that have been growing in Australia for over 100 years. I don't know if you've heard of places like the Dawson's Cactus Garden that has a very famous and potent psychedelic cactus there, but I'm not sure people have actually been eating it that long. There's things like, you know, you hear people doing eye circles, cactus circles, things like this. My most excitement for it is like, you know, if I'm trying to like make money off a cactus product in my dream world where I'm allowed to make whatever I want from my plants, I think microdosing is a really cool use of cactus, because I don't know if you've tried microdosing, but psilocybin's like 4 to 6 hours, it dips like halfway through the day. If I'm trying to microdose, it's because I want to be functional and practical. Cactus is a bit more stimulating and goes all day. So I think that's a nice little space for that. So I'm often caught in this position where I'm like trying to justify my research, where the reality is I'm just insane and I just want to do it. So I'm often like, so mescaline-assisted psychotherapy, what might this look? This could be a big thing. You should pay me. I'll look into this. But I think the reality is 12-hour trip having to pay for a therapist to be with someone for 12 hours, like, you're going to need 2 therapists at least, because someone's going to need to pee at some point. And now I'm paying 2 therapists for 12 hours. Like, oh, this is an expensive treatment. So as much as I think it would be interesting, I suspect maybe it's not the future of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. People are also very likely to vomit, both on mescaline and in cacti products, but even when the mescaline is pure. So I think in people that are trying to, in the context of medicine, reduce any possible adverse event, and you're likely to throw up, I don't think this will be the psychedelic that is chosen by the person ready to throw down that $1 billion. But he's hoping they give me $1 billion. You may see or hear people talking about mescaline outside of cactus. Oh, someone's raising their hand.
Well, in terms of the purging thing you just mentioned.
Yes.
So George's Perception, Aldous Huxley, he did mescaline hydrochloride, right?
Yes, and I believe he still vomits. And mescaline hydrochloride, you still vomit. In my understanding, nausea is still, like, not across the board, but as a general rule. So, like, because no one wants to vomit, right? Everyone's like, great, that sounds like a really cool trip, but how do I not throw up? You don't. You throw up. That's just how it's going to go. Yeah, when people do talk about feeling a lot better after they throw up, and I think my advice would be don't try to not throw up, like, get it out of you, I think. But yeah, I don't think there's any getting around it. So yeah, people talk about mescaline and other plants that aren't cactus. You can tell them, I said they're liars. No, tell them to send me samples or it's off. Because I can test these things, but there is stuff like this old acacia paper that kind of testing chemicals in plants is complicated, and to have a confident identity in anything, really you should be matching it with analytical grade substance that is pure. Whereas most people that are reporting these kind of weird findings are using matches against a library. So they haven't matched it against the chemical, they just have a match against some other data that's in their computer. And that's like not a high confidence match in my opinion. You need to match it with the chemical. And in this, there's also kind of some weird outliers because they found other stuff. Like, does it say nicotine, 4-amphetamines? Like, what is this MDMT? Like, what is this magical plant? I must have it. It doesn't exist. It's just a very odd and amazing combination of drugs to find in a single plant that makes me think, error, 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 error. But instead they've published. Don't know why. Bad. Alright, so you will also see many plants listed in the literature that have been found to have mescaline in them. I'm not doubting them all, even though now I'm kind of trying to cast doubt on everything. But of relevance to people interested in consuming mescaline cacti, there's really only two to kind of pay attention to. Depending on how nerdy you want to get about taxonomy, maybe they break into heaps of different groups, but let's just call them San Pedro and peyote. And there's a couple of other listed here, but what I'm trying to highlight is that some, particularly peyote, is threatened, right? So that's not a good source of plant. If it's endangered in the wild, probably shouldn't just be eating it uncritically without knowing where it came from. And as well as that, it's also incredibly slow growing, so it's like, how do we get it to come back? Like, how do we grow, or even at a basic level, if I want to grow it to get high, how long am I going to have to wait till I get high? Like 20 years? It's not really an efficient way to get there, as well as being a conservation problem. So I'm trying to highlight that. Most of these are very slow growing cactus, and the rest of them, besides San Pedro and peyote, they don't have enough mescaline to get you high unless you do an extraction from like, I don't know, 1,000 kilos or just some insane quantity. So part of my message is protect peyote, choose San Pedro, right? Like, I think that's an important conservation message that, like, is part of my goal to get that out there. You might hear people talking about San Pedro being endangered. That's not entirely accurate. It's like, well, so it being endangered is like we're worried the species is going to die. We're worried that humans, Homo sapiens, are going to disappear, right? We're not worried about that. That's not a problem. But we're certainly worried about people in specific areas being threatened by specific problems. Then we protect those people, but we're not calling people endangered. And that's the same case with San Pedro. San Pedro that are close to villages, in places that have a demand for mescaline, poor people cut down a heap of cactus and dry it and sell it out to make money to feed their family. Like, it makes sense, that's what happens. It's not like a species level concern, but we might lose like our favorite cultivar that grows near that village. That famous plant might get cut down. So it's like, it's still a concern, it's still a threat, but I'm like not screaming around emergency, but that is what we're doing with peyote. Like, it is an emergency. We have seen certain cultivars die out in my lifetime, and this species is gonna die out, straight up. All right, so this is what peyote looks like.
1 second, Captain.
The what?
Hello.
Hello.
Enter stage left. I've just got Liam's book. I'm just going to pass it around here. It's just come out. He showed a slide before. But just go around the room if you can. Please take a look, and we'll finish with it over there. But I thought I'll just get that going.
Thank you for the sprue. Yeah, you can get it it's in the Hemp Embassy, right?
It's in the Hemp Embassy. I believe they've already sold quite a few copies.
Very good.
So I will grab one.
All good bookshops. If they don't have it, they're not a good bookshop.
Thank you, Liam.
Thank you. But that's like takes a broad perspective. As much as I love this book, like, I'm dissatisfied by the cactus. They give me like 1,000 words. It's not enough. There's not enough. There's got more than 1,000 words for you here. So peyote grow in the desert. They're endangered, and like not all cacti grow the same. People always kind of like you basically your peyote are way more needy. If you want to grow peyote, they're going to need more from you. It's going to be more high risk. San Pedro is less the case. That's because these grow in a very niche environmental area with very little environmental change. They like to be somewhere where it's hot, it's dry, but also a little bit in the shade. Like, I want sun all day, but also I want shade. Like, very pedantic, this guy. And then if it gets wet for like a couple of days, or like, say 6 times a year instead of 4 times a year, maybe it will just rot on you and die. So you need to like be careful of where you place this. Whereas San Pedro, like I said, grows faster and is much more resilient and easy to grow, especially in Australia. They absolutely smash it. This is just a cute photo I included to try to touch on a bunch of those other cacti that were slow growing in the other list. I labeled under false peyotes. These are things that might be used, well, there's a few different things that might fall under that label. One, indigenous people might use it as a peyote substitute in the same ceremony if they couldn't find peyote. Another could be they just look like peyote and they grow in the same area. But there's a group of these kind of like, in particular this one I'm interested in, Astrophyta mysterias. They look a lot like peyote, but little to no mescaline, but very ornate patterns of these little furry dots. And that's kind of what people are growing them for, is for really like interesting, cool patterns. But that's what I'm talking about, false peyote. Trace amounts of mescaline, but probably not enough to get you there. I already used up this sweet tagline. But yeah, this is, I think, if you take nothing away from this talk, please remember this. If you want to get mescaline, you're not going to get there via peyote, get there via San Pedro. And if you do have so much peyote that you thought, oh, maybe I should eat some, it's way, way more valuable as a plant. Like, it's absolutely unbelievable. Like, there's no way I would consume a peyote in a setting where I could grow it, law permitting. I don't know if I gave my legal disclaimer. All plants associated with me are for cultivation purposes only. You are not going to eat them. You're not going to do anything like that. We all understand that. But if you would like to know how to eat them, totally happy to discuss that. Just don't tell me you're going to eat them, because no longer can we continue. So it's an insane little dance, but that is the legal advice that I have received. All right, so this is me trying to summarize a lot of what my work is about, is testing chemicals in plants. What are the chemicals in this plant? How much of which chemical is in what plant? And this little diagram on the left is basically trying to describe how, on the left? It's on my left, on your right, sorry. But anyway, so we got a cactus, right? We freeze dry it, powder it up, then we put it in some solvents. For my mescaline method, I use neat methanol. Then I filter it through a syringe, and I measure out a specific quantity in one of these vials. And you see there's many more vials, because as well as the one vial, the other thing that I need to include is a number of vials that contain different concentrations of the drug that I'm trying to quantify. Because like I said before, you've got to match the chemical, right, to know that you've got it, to sure. So not only I'm matching it with the chemical at a range of different concentrations, which allow me to say, hey, which of those concentrations is most like my sample? And that's how we quantify the drug in the plant. And the instrument that we use for this is a triple quad LCMS, liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which is what this weird little robot thing looking is. But basically it spits out a chromatogram that looks something like this, and we can use that chromatogram to compare against the chromatogram produced by our standard, by the lab grade stuff. So we're basically matching a picture to the picture of our pure shit and saying, yeah, that's the good stuff.
Is that stock photography?
Sorry?
Stock photography?
Which part? No, that, oh yeah, terrible. It's like, the other thing is when you work in any setting, I think, and then you see people trying to take photographs of your professional setting, and it's like, that's insane. They're not doing anything that's real. Like, what am I doing here? I'm comparing a dry bit of cactus to a wet bit of cactus. I don't need to do that. I don't do that. I did that because they asked me to do that. But in one hand, the paler looking one, that's actually a freeze-dried bit of cactus. I think that's why I included it, because of freeze drying as part of this preparation process. But also, you can freeze dry anything, and you know when you want to keep a plant, so you make a pressing, and it keeps it dry and like somewhat stable. Well, the freeze dry, you can keep the shape of the plant more. So I think this is the future of my cactus specimen collecting dream, is freeze dried cactus. So there are other drugs in San Pedro and peyote besides mescaline. And the beauty of this cannabis audience is, I think, your knowledge of pharmacology of plants is quite advanced, because I can, hopefully now we'll use this useful anecdote, we'll make this tie in. THC does something, right? But everyone thinks that it's different when you add CBD. And then it's different again if you add CBG. And then there are all these other cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, whatever. And then changing these combinations changes people's preference for the plant. So this is happening in all plants, right? There's all this really complicated chemistry going on. It's part of the reason why no one's making plants into medicine, is because if there's 1,000 chemicals, how can I demonstrate that those 1,000 chemicals are safe? Like, it's much easier to demonstrate that one is safe. So there are these other drugs. I mean, personally, I don't lean so hard into the entourage effect. In my extensive cannabis consumption experience, my primary metric of concern is THC content. How strong is this? That is my main thing of concern. Maybe if I've been on the same strain for ages and I switch it up to something a little bit weaker, I'm like, oh, that might feel as good. Okay, there is something to be said for the entourage effect. but I think particularly in Trichocereus, I'm less convinced. The main thing that is closest to being convincing is this hordenine compound. You might see it in bodybuilding supplements. It's like supposed to be a mild stimulant. I personally haven't got a lot about it. But sure, you chuck a bit of that with your mescaline, maybe you get a bit of something. So that could be happening within both peyote and San Pedro. But peyote actually has a whole range of other chemicals, heaps more complex than Trichocereus. I think I've got a crazy list coming up on the next slide. But I'm drawing attention to this one, peyote, because in the late 1800s it was used as a hypnotic. I haven't tried it, but if something is making you sleepy, it's definitely having a psychoactive effect. So sure, maybe peyote is more sleepy because it combines mescaline with peyote. Maybe not, but there's all chemicals, right? These are all the, and just to highlight how much more complex peyote is, and these are just the chemicals that have been identified. The other headache and exciting thing of my job is when we find something that hasn't been identified, and I'm telling you, you need to match it to the pure material to identify it, how the hell do you identify it? With a very long headache and a lot of difficulties. So finding a new thing that isn't on this list is going to be very difficult and time consuming. But these are also, I didn't get into this previously because I thought it was too nerdy, but now here we are. So San Pedro, let's say that there's 3 species for simplicity's sake. Some people say that there's 30, some people say there's 50, some people might just say that there's 1. But across this whole diversity, different ones contain different chemicals, and these are all the ones that have been found in all the Trichocereus, even bigger than just San Pedro. Here, these are all the chemicals that have been found in one species, Lothophora williamsii. There are other Lothophora with other chemicals, but just peyote. So I'm trying to highlight here, peyote chemistry, crazy. Also includes this peyotine stuff, which we think is a hypnotic. So my bet is, if one of these is having a complex entourage effect, my bet is on peyote. That's kind of what I'm trying to highlight here. This is me also being like, hey, it's not just drugs, but really, it is. Many things are cool about cactus. You don't just have to be interested in their mescaline content. You can make cool pairs of pants like this. I call them my Pakanoi pants. I don't know if no one laughs, so no one knows this deep nerdy joke. Doesn't matter. This is a crest. This is interesting because of its weird shape. These are cactus fruits. They taste really good, kind of like dragon fruit, but definitely the best tasting cactus fruit I've eaten off any fruit. Particularly on, I don't know how deep cactus head's here, but if you know the plant Trichocereus WK, oh my god, that one is one I'm breeding for the flavour of the fruit. Really, really good. And if you're interested in the many other interesting, beautiful, appreciable things about cactus beyond chemistry, even though that is a pet obsession of mine, I wrote a small book that tells you exactly what to appreciate and why. Because like, my mum comes to my garden, she's like, well, grow some fucking vegetables, man. It's just like all the exact same cactus. But actually, to me, they're all unique individuals with different faces, but it's not so obvious. So the book is basically me trying to justify and explain that. All right. I started prematurely, or maybe necessarily, giving this explainer before. Many species of Trichocereus, and then fewer, but still many within this San Pedro group. But I need to give you useful content to learn. So let's just say that there's 3, just for simplicity's sake. And this concludes with you knowing how to find the most drugs. So bear with me, right? So we've got on the far right, we've got Trichocereus pakanoi. This is the one people classically identify as San Pedro, and it has short spines, right? In the middle, we've got Trichocereus peruvianus, from Peru. It has longer spines, right? And this one on the left, this also has longer spines, but the pattern of the spines coming out of each areole is not in the same star shape, right? The star the spines make is different each time. In addition to that, it also stays quite thin. This is a Trichocereus bridgesii. The reason that you want to know how to identify Trichocereus bridgesii, or to nerd, a bridge, is because it is, in my testing, the most consistently potent mescaline container. We haven't published our full data set yet, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to argue with the hundreds of samples I've tested. And at this point, if I'm choosing new cactus, I'm pretty much choosing it based on, do I think it's a bridge? So this spination being an inconsistent star pattern, as well as staying thin in full sunlight, are 2 things that I'm looking as markers of what I would consider a true bridgesii. And the true bridgesii, not across the board, I think I'll give some more detail in a sec, but as a general rule, if I have to bet who's going to be the strongest, it's going to be the true bridge. So San Pedro, the flowers are almost always white, like the one on the far right. But there is one species in the San Pedro group that is an exception to this rule, Talhuiacensis, and we will speak to me before publishing this recording because I don't want to get in trouble, but I think I'm the first person to ever identify mescaline in this species. Not only identify, because I found it in a bunch of species that are new, which is always a novelty, but I think this one is enough to do something. So that's like another layer of cool, especially when it has a coloured flower. Because currently, so what you can see in this plant here, it has coloured flowers, but you can see kind of like that, but even more so, it's getting more spiny, looking less like one of these typical San Pedros, right? Like, looks way more spiny. And that's because to get these coloured flowers, people have crossed it with another genus that has a coloured flower to like bring the coloured flower to the San Pedro. Two problems: one, not much drugs in the hybrid, and two, it doesn't look like a San Pedro. Well, problem to me, because in my mind, like a mescaline-rich plant with like rainbow flowers, like, oh yeah, that's what I want, and that hasn't quite got there yet. But with Talhoya sensis, perhaps we can make such a dream possible. These are things that people send me messages all the time asking me, have I got the cactus I want? And I sadly reply, no. Especially this one on the, I don't know what's left or right anymore. The one that's over there, Cereus peruvianus, and it does look a lot like, because remember we talked about Peru already, the one in the center here is also peruvianus, but this is Trichocereus peruvianus, the San Pedro that we want, and this is Cereus peruvianus, the difference in the name being the absence of the word tricho, which means hair, and in the flowers of this guy won't have hair. But you ain't got all year to wait around for a flower, you need to know if there's drugs in this cactus now. The other thing that you should think about is, if you cut it at the cross-section, and you look at the cross-section, the look-alike, not the one that you want, will look more like an asterisk, where the one that looks like what you want will look more like a star, because the ribs on this guy are very thin. These are two other ones that people commonly ask. These Pilosocereus, sometimes people call them blue torch or something like that. I don't love common names, but you'll see it in Bunnings. And you might also see, I think even Shulgin gave some lecture once in which reported finding mescaline in this, but I believe that he incorrectly identified that cactus, so no fun there. But the one in the middle, I think there is also trace amounts of mescaline, but not enough for fun. Looks like cactus, trace amounts of mescaline. That doesn't excite me. I also really like these, and this is something that is, for a few reasons, isn't super developed within the research literature or within people's gardens. The main reason being is they take super long to grow. These kind of look a lot like a San Pedro, like they grow like a column with a few more ribs and they get heaps fatter. But maybe you'll get this much growth in like 5 years, depending on the plant. So it's not much like the situation with peyote, even if this contains mescaline, which I'm not sure how well demonstrated that in the literature, but another spoiler for coming papers, have found a number of good mescaline-containing giant Trichocereus, but they grow so slowly that it's not really useful. I do have a friend of mine, I don't know about this audience, I'm like, should I just go crazy on my cactus rant, or is no one like following along? But anyway, there's a guy named, for him, if you know about this stuff, you know about this guy, he's a legend, he's really into these giant cactus, and he went to Argentina, which is where they grow in habitat, these terschekii, tracking them down, looking for them or whatever. And he found groups of people that are eating these terschekii. They're apparently not maintaining a tradition, but have been like inspired to try this cactus based on other reports. But they've still been doing it a number of years. So, and then like I get like, now I'm not sure how much speculation it is or how much it was the real story, but people are talking about being related to some indigenous tradition there, but now I'm getting like, I don't know. But cool stuff. I do, Tachymbalensis is also, I'm like, now I'm just giving away all my secrets. But this is maybe what I consider besides Brigessii, which everyone wants because it's the strongest drug one. Tachymbalensis is super cool because it's a fat one, but slightly faster growing than these other two, and mostly mescaline is concentrated in the outer green flesh. I found a number of Tachymbalensis that have a higher mescaline concentration in the inner flesh, which if you think about it, if it's 60% of the total plant volume, it's good. We want high mescaline in the center because then overall by weight the plant will be more rich in mescaline. So Tachymbalensis, really cool plant I think, and they're also very beautiful. I have noticed a similar trend in both these other two species actually, but whilst they might have more mescaline in the center, it's like 0.2% mescaline, so it's just like not really a useful quantity, but it's still doing this same trend. this is an odd place to inject this, and most of you are plant people, so maybe this is simple to know, but there's a break after this, and then we're doing a cactus auction, and the auction might make slightly more sense with this information. So, Homo sapien lium. Homo, genus, sapien, species, lium, cultivar. That's the individual. So we follow the same format with the San Pedro, Trichocereus, genus, Bridgesii, species, the strongest mescaline-containing species, and Ben, the individual cultivar. And the reason we might want to know this, and again, beautiful cannabis audience, people like their strains, you know, Pineapple Express, OG Kush, whatever the strain is that you like, you can make an anticipation about the chemical profile of that plant. So that's at the kind of level I'm trying to get at this. I've been testing a lot of different individual cultivars of San Pedro, and as a general rule, it seems that the cultivar is consistent in its concentration of mescaline to some degree. So if you know that Ben is good, which I'm telling you, it's good, then I suggest that Ben is a plant that you choose if you want a mescaline-rich plant, because you're only going to grow it, obviously. Okay, if you want to get more into like the more botanical leaning nitty-gritty on this topic, like what are the different species and different cultivars, etc., I recommend these texts. If you want to know more about the chemistry, yeah, you really can't go past Keeper's book. It's online, it's freely available, and it's very dense, but he's kind of done like the best literature review ever of all publications about cactus chemistry, so it's a really convenient one-stop shop to help you avoid having to trek through Google Scholar. Yeah, and San Pedro Hybrid by Patrick Knoll is a beautiful tabletop book, which I do recommend, but if you want to know more about like the botany, and I don't know if anyone else is trying to write about the species besides me, but if you are to try to do that, I suggest you use the top book, the San Pedro Group by Patrick Knoll. Fire me. Okay, so and this is like I was saying at the start, most of the plants that I'm interested in have received very little like analytical chemistry attention, and this slide is trying to summarize that there's actually been shit all studies done of cactus, and the more you look at most of these plants, you'll be like, oh my god, there's nothing being done on anything. But what do I say here? There's 14 papers total, which I still think is not, it's not 14 studies, it's less than 14 studies, it's 14 papers that have come out of that. There was only 36 individual plants, the most of which were Pachinoi. Only 3 Bridgesii had ever been tested, and like only 5 species that had ever actually been accompanied with the name. So it's like they just tested cannabis indica, but not telling you what, the only species they told you were 5. They only ever tested 5 individuals once. Like the level of information is like super low. And yeah, what I'm really trying to highlight here is no one else had tested the inner flesh before. The reason being, I don't know if you've ever processed cactus, obviously you haven't, because why would we, because we're outstanding. But it's super like gelatinous and really annoying shit to deal with, so most chemists just skip that generally. But we've been testing it too, and like I said, with some of them we found more mescaline on the inside, and certainly with a number of plants I found like over 2% mescaline in the core, which is just like, well, it's probably wasteful to throw away. But when people talk about these big numbers, like over 3% at this point is kind of what I consider impressive. A, there's not many reports of that. 2, you can see one of these is from 1948. Pretty much any chemistry study done before 2000, I'm like, I don't need to read you. I don't believe it. Because, you know, technology has changed so much that it's kind of just a surefire way to learn errors. And then there's this Ogun Bodidi plant. So Ogun Bodidi did the best study that's previously out there, the most comprehensive. He tested a whole heap of plants, and 4.7 might have been his second highest result. I think there might have also been a 5%, but maybe it's just one, I haven't written here, so let's assume I haven't made an error. 4.7 was his highest one, and it's actually in circulation. People call this the Ogun clone, right? So it's cool because it meant I could get it, and that means I could test it, and I did not get 4.7%, right? So now, yes, 5 minutes, oh my god. Okay, this is me summarizing mescaline peyote. Conclusion is, I think there's shit all, like, I have not got anywhere near the numbers people report. Everyone thinks peyote is stronger than San Pedro. I currently am no longer convinced. I think San Pedro is stronger than peyote. I tested heaps and heaps of these bloody things. I've only found 10 or so cultivars get above 3%. They're pretty much all, they are all Bridgesii that have beaten that number except for one Tachymbalensis. Yeah, you sense my excitement now. And of those, almost all of them except for one or two have this really true Bruggesii look, like they stay thin. There is one example, Field Bruggesii, which did incredibly well, I think roughly 5%. That doesn't look like a true bridge, it looks like a hybrid, but that one is a kicker. So yeah. Anyway, so now I am going crazy being like, why is my results different from Ogan's? Why am I sometimes getting different results when I test the same plant? So I'm just trying to test the same plant heaps of points in time. So I'm now using like an ear piercing needle, a tiny needle, and I'm testing it at all the spots marked out here. I was previously using a knife and cutting out big chunks, but now I'm like, no, I need to know distribution, so I know where's the strongest spot, and then I can know over time, I can start doing this every minute of every day type thing to know how does it change throughout the day, what's the best season, etc. Because my results have been so varied, I'm losing confidence in the comparability. So when someone says they got this with one result, I'm like, what does that even mean? How does that one result, if the plant changes like by 400%, which I have seen do on a single plant, have 400% difference in 400 times difference in mescaline concentration, like from like 0 to 4% in the same plant, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. I'm trying to find out. It's a headache. I'm also doing it by like cardinal directions to try to see if sun exposure makes any difference. Here's how you dose mescaline. That's on my website. You can check it out. There's a cactus auction next. I'll continue to talk fast about cactus. Please come, spend money, support local growers. Thank you.
Okay. We are going to take questions, so don't get too far. We've got 5-10 minutes for questions, but I'm going to give you this mic and grab the other one. But I might take the first question first.
What about t-shirts?
Oh yeah, you
On
can.
my website.
Oh,
On my
you've got
website.
it here.
Yeah, no, I didn't bring it. I came on the plane. I didn't bring anything. Yeah, that's why the hemp MC have my book.
It's on his website.
Yeah, sorry.
But the book's at the Hemp Embassy. Please grab it. Might need to yell the first question out while I get the mic. Thank you.
Hey, great talk, thank you so much. I think you spoke a lot about the science about cactus, but I haven't heard anything about your personal experience and the spiritual journey that's possible through this medicine. Could you touch on that?
This is a conversation that requires me to consider which professional hat I'm wearing, which crime am I... Yeah, there we go. No longer at work. Look, I identify as a person that consumes many types of psychoactives, including cactus, and depending on how public the event is, that may or may not have been strictly in legal contexts. But in terms of just growing the plant, cactus thrives on neglect. Like I think the journey of being, for most gardeners, even great gardeners, is the more you do it, the more you kill plants. Like it actually, when you look at any gardener that you respect, ask them about the plants they killed. It's probably fucking concerning. But the cactus like resisted my murderous ways better than any. They really thrive here, and I grow outside of Sydney. They absolutely love the weather there, a bit less humid. So they kind of just kept sticking around. Like I've still been growing many plants for decades, but I think cactus is the only one that I've had since the beginning. And like, you know, plants have died on the way, but when I first got into this, I've still got some of those first plants, because I can't say that for many of the other psychoactive plants that I was growing. So just strictly how well they match my local conditions. And I think there is some like spiritual journey or like association between me and the psychoactive experience. But I guess how I would explain it is I think changing my consciousness helps me better assess like, who am I as a person? Where's the me? Is the me in the body? Because then if now I take a drug that changed my mind, like, is my body different, or is it me that's different and that isn't in the body? And the plants are similar to that too. Like in caring for plants and looking for plants, like, is that an individual? Can I speak to it? What does our relationship mean? So I think there's a lot caught up in it, and you can probably guess as well, like I'm just super hesitant between admitting to crime because I could lose like my association. So I'm constantly doing weird word dances. You should see the word dances I do at work. It's crazy. Oh, you know, I mean, I have never done crime.
His dedication to research is holistic. He loves the plant.
Yeah, it's weird verbal gymnastics, but it's how you play the game.
Okay, we've got a question here.
Lovely talk, Liam, as always. Are you also looking at the effect of like high nitrogen fertilizers and their ability to the cacti to use that nitrogen to make mescaline rapidly?
Yeah, I'm super interested in substrate spiking experiments for psychoactive plants in general. I want to do this with cactus, but like I said, the variation at an even cultivar level makes me want to pin down the whole body at a single time frame first, and then I'll have to go over time, and then I guess I'll get to substrate spiking. I think I'm actually gearing up for a phalaris, which is like a DMT and tryptamine container, and because they grow so fast and are so easy to grow, I think that's going to be like how I trial this substrate spiking with these tryptamines first.
All right, another question?
Yes. Thank you, Liam. I know how to pronounce Bridgesii. I've never known that. But I want to find out, is mescaline picked up in RDT swabs?
No, but it is structurally similar to amphetamine, so I wouldn't want to just say it's all going to be sweet, even though I think it probably will be sweet. I would, until we can actually get one of the real tests that they use, smash down a bunch of cactus and see what happens, I won't be advising this behaviour. And even then, I won't, except in a legal setting. Alright, well I trust Lee. Lee said it's good. Cactus on.
All right.
As you're obviously a researcher, across all psychoactive plants, what do you think the most important area of research is?
Well, for me, currently, I guess it depends what important is. Is it important for medicine? Is it important for the battle of drug reform? Is it important for sustainability? I think I have different answers for all of those things. I think low-hanging fruit for medicine right now, psychedelics, sure. There's going to be an impact. The real trouble is going to be how do we make it affordable and accessible. But is it a good medicine? I suspect probably, despite all the drama with evidence. In terms of sustainability, I think plants, anything that is plant-based, encouraging people to grow their own stuff and monitor, because when you grow your own stuff, you know when you eat it all, right? It's a different, when it just comes from the magic shop, you don't really see the footprint that you're leaving. And I gave another thing too, besides sustainability, mescaline, and drug reform. And so I think for drug reform, for me, now I actually, as much as I love cannabis and psychedelics, I'm leaning away from those because I worry that people are exceptionalist about that. They're like, oh, cannabis is okay, but not this. Psychedelics is okay, but not this. And like, this is the antithesis of my approach. I'm like, it's all good. Like, there is a right setting for everything and a wrong setting for everything. And just because something's a chemical or this or that, I'm not just going to chuck it out, right? So, yeah, it's different depending on what my goal is.
We've got a question here.
Hi, Liam. So you're looking at the chemistry, but are you also looking at plant genetics in any way? Or are you aware of anybody who is looking at plant genetics and population in relation to, in order to match your chemical analysis to your genetic individuals?
For cactus?
Cactus.
Sadly no, but I also know that you are the guy, and I am the man that is the king of cactus samples. We are doing, like, because no one in my group is a genetic expert. We have another group that we were doing other work with, and we just parted ways, but they were kind of going to be our genetic go-to for acacia and DMT, which is another area of our work. But we've actually just lost that relationship. So short of me learning how to use a PCR badly, we don't have a genetics arm. So
The Entheome Foundation is very, very interested at some point in trying to sequence these, at least to get a baseline genetic profile, if not the full genome. The genome is the expensive part here, but
but that's the backbone, right?
that's the desirable part.
Super interested.
I was curious to know whether you knew if anyone was.
No, I don't think it's being done. It's like, at least like in the mushroom world and to a degree in the acacia world, there's some clear pathway for, ooh, maybe we can make money from this. With cactus, it's just me being like, yeah, sure, 14-hour trip, 2 therapists. Like, yeah.
All right, and I guess this is my last question then. I guess no one's looking at the mescaline biosynthesis pathway.
Well, so I don't know if anyone saw that paper that was published maybe a month ago about DMT biosynthesis. I looked at some genetically modified tobacco plants to look at DMT pathways in the tobacco, and the same group has actually done a very similar paper with mescaline from 2024. So there is some work to be done there, but some stuff has been done. And that group is like absolutely on fire. They have really fancy toys. I have envy.
One last question.
Just have to break down the aforementioned like that plant?
I mean, it's genetics, so it's not, well, I mean, there's chemistry there too. It's not my area of expertise, but I can tell you the highlight for me was both the highlight and heartbreak, because they actually beat us to a punch on a finding that we'd also demonstrated, and that, which I think has a good conservation message, and that was that DMT in Psychotria viridis, the traditional DMT container used in ayahuasca, was richest in the new growth. So that's like a great harvesting message, right? If you can disincentivize harvesting old growth, that's a good thing. So I noticed that because they said it before we did, and now we're sad.
As we said, Liam's book's just come out and it's at the embassy. Definitely check it out and grab a copy if you can and let people know about it. I'm going to have it, this is a copy I've borrowed, so I'll have it here for about the next talk, whatever. If someone just wants to grab it off the table, have a look and then put it back, that's fine. I'll have it here for the next hour or two. Yeah, absolutely.
Cactus object next.
And then